Morning glory, evening grace, Americans. Hugh Hewitt, welcome to a special couple of hours on the Hugh Hewitt Show. This is the second in a series of conversations about the role of God or not God in the modern world. The principal interlocutor on the party of not God is Christopher Hitchens, Vanity Fair columnist, author most recently of the New York Times bestseller, God is Not Great, frequent contributor to the program, and Professor David Allen White, for more than 25 years, a professor of English literature at the United States Naval Academy, the author of the Encyclopedia of Shakespeare, and most recently, The Horn of the Unicorn. I describe Professor White as a supporter of the Society of Pius X, a Roman Catholic. Today, these 2 hours, not theology, but really culture, the church and culture, and whether or not Western civilization is better off for there having been a robust Christian faith. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. Christopher, welcome back. David Allen White, welcome back. Good to have you both.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Hugh.
I'd like to start, since we're taping this on August 8th, which is the feast of St. Dominic, the founder of the Dominicans, the teaching-preaching order, by asking David Allen White and then Christopher Hitchens, is it a good thing that Dominic lived and that the church embraced his tradition?
Well, being a Catholic, of course, I am very fond of all the saints. Catholics have special favorite saints, and St. Dominic plays a very special role, again, not just in teaching, but in preserving culture. The establishment of the monasteries and the establishment of the Dominican order, extraordinarily important, I think, in holding on to civilization and advancing civilization. And I do see the two very much as interconnected. I'm not sure there can be one without the other.
Christopher Hitchens.
Well, I say in my book that religion was our first, and for that reason partly our worst, but still our first attempt at philosophy, at understanding the world and our place in it. And that this is obviously attested by the libraries of the monasteries, as it is in the building of cathedrals and the contents of many great art galleries. What I argue is that religion can no longer perform that function. And if you're going to claim that for it, Professor White claims it only for the Christian church, you can't deny that claim to the rabbis who kept a lot of scrolls going and spread a great deal of learning and established a number of schools, though they teach a ridiculous orthodoxy, nor indeed to the Muslims who, at a time of extreme darkness in Christian Europe, kept alive the ideas of Greek philosophy and retransmitted them to us, to Peter Abelard and other Catholic philosophers via Andalusia. It doesn't say anything to the credit of Islam that Muslim societies did that.
Would you deny that legacy to them, Professor White?
Oh, I'm not claiming exclusivity in that sense. Of course, there have been many, many different factions, different visions that have helped keep civilization alive. But I would assign something of a special role to what I call the Christian West. In fact, it's one of the things that troubles me about God is Not Great. There is a sense all the way through, and being a Catholic, that's what I must defend. I can't defend those things I don't necessarily believe in, but I, of course, have a sense of the role they have played in the advancement of civilization. But there is a sense in the book of looking at the dark side and the downside almost exclusively. There's a wonderful comment by Dorothy Sayers about people who only read the Inferno, the first part of Dante's Divine Comedy. And she says it's a bit like visiting one of the great cities of Europe, say Paris, and only spending your time in the sewers. If you come up above into the landscape, you're going to see not just Notre Dame, but the Louvre filled with paintings. You're probably going to have a fine French meal as well, which I think is part of that civilization. And the incredible diversity that Catholic culture spread throughout Europe is still fascinating and part of our legacy. Not denying the others played a role, but I would assert there is something special and extraordinarily beautiful in what the church offered.
Christopher Hitchens, did you go out of your way to avoid elaborating on Christianity's gifts to civilization?
First, I should just say to Professor White, I suspect him of undue modesty here. Does he not, in fact, say that the Catholic Church is the one true church?
Oh, yes, I do. Absolutely. I do.
So that what Mr. Hewitt believes as a Christian is, in a sense, irrelevant to you. I mean, you just think he's wrong. He's in the wrong church. He's not really a proper Christian at all.
Well,
I think we should all. I mean, since my views have been very well advertised, I think we should understand that I'm not arguing with one of those a la carte Catholics this time. You're the real thing, aren't you?
Well, I think of myself as a traditional Catholic. Let me put my cards on the table. From about age 17, I was raised very liberal Protestant, and at an early age, about 17, lost any faith at all. So I read your book with a familiarity because I made many of the same arguments myself at one time. I came into the church, the Catholic Church, at the age of 31, and I must say, one of the men you respect, I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, one of the men I think you respect, Evelyn Waugh, was very influential in moving me towards the church. But as you well know, Waugh was troubled at the end of his life at what was going on in the church. As he said at one point, Vatican II knocked the guts out of me. So when I came in, I began trying to get a sense of what was going on and found what is called the traditional movement. It's simply those who are maintaining what the church had always taught over the centuries.
No, well, I say in my book that I think it was a great loss to the church. I rather sympathize with Evelyn Waugh on this point. By the way, I'm not dodging your earlier question. I'm coming straight to it. But the abandonment, in particular, of the Latin Mass, the so-called Tridentine Mass, was an enormous blow to the morale of the church, and the subsequent rituals appear to be extremely banal. But does that not give you some difficulty in that must mean that, along with people like Mel Gibson and others, you essentially say that Pope John the 23rd was not just not infallible, but deeply in error? From a Catholic point of view, isn't there an element of impossibility in that position?
No, and fortunately I don't have to say that, because the last infallible pronouncement of a pope, as you also mention in your book, was the doctrine of the Assumption, which came out in 1951. The so-called liturgical changes in the church were never in any way decreed as doctrine or dogma. Now, obviously, it's troubling, and I do find it very interesting. In fact, I've talked on Hugh's show about this. I'm delighted that the Latin Mass is quote-unquote back, although, as the Pope himself has admitted, it was never abrogated, never really went away. And I know for a fact there is a surge going on out there of priests who are now learning the traditional Mass.
Well, and there was always the movement associated with Archbishop Lefebvre. I'm nostalgic for the Latin Mass in the aesthetic sense that you were talking about earlier, but I don't miss the expression perfidious Jew, which was one part of its ritual, for example.
Well, it is in the Good Friday service when we pray for almost everyone. The prayers go on at length, and indeed that phrase is used, but as you probably know, it means fallen away. It is not in any sense a judgment on them. And of course, one is under the obligation to pray for all souls to come into the church, because as you said, I do believe it's the one true church.
Well, now, then, now we've clarified that. Look, on the point of whether one only emphasizes the bad, my book is written as a critique of religion, so I take it for granted that those who believe in the virtues of it already know what those are. Now, I couldn't be without Notre Dame, for example, nor could I be without quite a lot of devotional music. I could actually do without a fair amount of devotional painting, but who cares what my opinions on painting are? My point would be this. We have no means of absolutely knowing for certain that the people who built and painted and composed those things were themselves believers. What we do know is it would have been very dangerous for them not to be, extremely dangerous, and many of them did have to write and perform in fear. We know that because of what happened to Giordano Bruno, to Galileo, and to many others, and from many other testimonies. I actually don't think St. Peter's in Rome is that wonderful a building, but if you think it is, if you want to take credit for it, then you have to accept also the responsibility for the fact that it was built on the revenues of a special sale of indulgence.